welcome back to the Crafternoon Podcast. Today we are going into a little bit of a history deep dive. This is something that I have massive interest in, just in general, social history, and I know that Meg, you also have a bit of a history nerd brain as well.
So in this episode, Daisy's going to take us through a deep dive into the history of journals and scrapbooks, which I think will be super interesting. And later on, I'm also going to be chatting to Mandy from PaperOfThePast, who you might have seen on Instagram sharing photos of her scrapbook collection. So she's going to be sharing why she collects them, where she finds them, and I think it'll be really interesting to hear her perspective as well. So over to you, Daisy.
Over the years, I have compiled a collection of various different journals and letters and old personal items of people from the past. So I have a few autograph books. I've got a whole stack of letters from one person that goes into like more detail on their life and stuff. And these are kind of a bit of inspiration for me, I suppose, with my own journals and seeing that they can last this long, and they've left a little bit of them in these little journals. So I thought that it'd be nice to share a bit of that on here. I have put together some things to share with Meg, and Meg has not seen them yet.
Be interesting to see the bit of a deep dive into the history of journals and stationery, I suppose, and scrapbooks and all that stuff. So the ones you've collected, what sort of date range are they from?
So I could have gone way back. We could have gone back to caveman days. But I tried to focus on the 19th and 20th century, maybe a little bit of the 18th, but yeah, primarily 19th up to 20th. Because if not, we could be here for years. There's a few that are linked to my family, and then these ones are ones that I've found on eBay or found in a charity shop or like an antique shop, basically secondhand, which makes me sad that people put such personal items.
I was gonna ask, like, where do you find them? It's like they're sort of lost almost. So I suppose you're kind of rehoming them in a way.
To begin with, I kind of went back through kind of where scrapbooking, like the word and everything, came about and where it was first used and stuff. In the Oxford Dictionary, it defines scrapbooking or a scrapbook as a blank book in which pictures, newspaper cuttings and the like are pasted for preservation. So kind of what we do now, really. It's just we've got more stuff to preserve. I feel like it's one of those things where people go by the official Oxford Dictionary when they brought it in, and like put it in like officially as to that's when it started. But in my personal opinion, it's like journaling, I feel like, and scrapbooking and just having some sort of personal book surely has been about longer than what they say. But they say that it came about in the official Oxford English Dictionary in about 1821, but it can, like, it's been referenced. I think that's like difference between noun and verb as well. I don't know English like that, but like there's like different ways that it's come about. But that's when it was like officially put in the dictionary as, here is a word, this is a thing that people can do. But then when I have gone back on the newspaper archives, which is one of my favourite pastimes, this is some of the things that I found on there, referencing scrapbooking and paper documenting, I suppose. And there was on the official Oxford Dictionary thing, they say it was referenced in 1817 for the first time in the Times, London. So I think it was referenced earlier, put in the dictionary a few years after, and then obviously from the 1820s it's kind of been used more and expanded from there. But I definitely believe that it's before then, that it's,
Yeah.
you know, there's definitely going to be people who have done scrapbooking without a label on it. The little clippings, which we'll put on the screen for people to see, were just me doing a little keyword search of scrapbook into the newspaper archive. A lot of them were people selling, or businesses and stuff who've obviously come about doing paper products, and then they've added like scrapbooks into their
Oh, they're hopping on
wares.
the trend. That sounds familiar.
Yeah. It's basically a brand, or like two people, S&J Fuller. I feel like they describe things so poshly, because obviously Old English was so, like, you were so well spoken. So there's a lot of big words here that I'd probably stumble upon. I'm going to stumble over them. It says, S&J Fuller most respectfully inform the nobility and gentry that they have now on sale an elegant collection of beautiful bound books for manuscript writing, and guard books of all sizes for collecting of drawings, prints and scraps. And then it kind of goes on to talk about them as their little business people. But it's one of those things where this is the old advertising that people would have for what we now have as like social media.
Yeah, no, it would have been
Weird to think.
Which is funny because there's no even like picture of what it is.
Right.
It's just, it's elegant, and it's, you know, we respectfully inform you that you must buy this journal, you must buy this notebook and scrapbook. Did you find out what a guard book is?
From what Google's saying, it just says a guard book is a book with sewn in guards or stubs designed for adding extra material like clippings, photographs or other documents. So I'm imagining it being kind of similar to how you used to get stamp books for collecting stamps that had like those little almost like vellum pockets in them, so you didn't have to stick the stamp down, you could just pop them in. So one of the other things that I added on there was a little snippet of basically someone describing how to take impressions of a plant. So this was like things that people did as like a pastime, and I feel like it's something that we still do now, just not as much. But they had this in a newspaper talking about how to take impressions of a plant, and it goes into very like detail on the type of paper, how to prep the paper, how to dry the flowers, all of that sort of thing. And it's just interesting to me because nowadays it's like just smash it in a book, let it dry for a few days, see what happens. So this was someone had passed away, I think, and this was one of his possessions that was being sold off, part of the estate type thing.
Kind of similar to like commonplacing, where people would not necessarily write about, well, they might write about like their day-to-day stuff, but like they were just like collecting stuff, and then it was almost a bit of a just, here's a volume of like everything I found interesting, I suppose.
Yeah, I would go to assume that this was a guy who probably had some sort of, potentially he travelled, potentially he had like in his scrapbooks, in his books that he owned, they were probably of some sort of importance, whether that is the things he's collected as in information from his travels, pictures from his travels, engravings, whatever it is, or whether it's like a collection of books that he's got from wherever he's travelled to. So it's stuff that is of importance to future generations, I would assume. But it's just really interesting seeing that he had scrapbooks and stuff as well. And I feel like scrapbooks back then were definitely not what we do now. It's not going to be like, you know, he's got all these catalogues and books on really cool history, and then also his scrapbooks of his family. That's probably not the type of scrapbook that he's collected and stuff. It's probably much more scrapbooks of probably more junk journaling, really, like things that he has collected and doesn't want to just disappear, pretty much. But those were from like 1818, 1835, 1823, so early 1800s. They were talking about some type of scrapbook. however that may seem. I don't really know how that would look because there's no pictures. Unless you actually have one of these scrapbooks. Yeah, it's hard to tell what these exact books would have looked like, so you can kind of only assume it. But going along the lines of scrapbooking and the importance and like books that have been kept for however long, because of the things that they include inside them, I found a article, like a little blog posty thing, on a guy called Thomas Pickstock, and it was a travel journal that has been kept, and it's from 1843. I will add a little link to the blog post which has more photos on it, so people can have a look if they want to. But this came across much more, I don't know, it looks more junk journal-y. There's a mix of writing, drawings, pieces he's cut out and stuck in there. Obviously he's taken it on his travels and he's added things whilst he's been on his travels. So in terms of a journal that's very much more similar to how people journal today, this one came across a lot more aligned with what we know as travel journaling and stuff now, when people actually take a journal with them and add bits and pieces to them. When I think of scrapbooking, for me, the first, like old scrapbooking, the first thing that comes to mind, and I don't know if this is the same with you as well, but the first thing that comes to mind when I think old scrapbook are these little Victorian colourful picture things, chromolithography type of print making sort of process that they used a lot in the Victorian time, which is why they were quite popular in scrapbooks, because they were everywhere, it seems. But that's kind of what comes to mind for me. If someone goes, what did an old scrapbook look like? My brain instantly goes, those little colourful cut out, die cut things that they just seem to stick absolutely anywhere.
So were they quite like cheap to produce, I'm assuming, and that's why they were sort of prevalent?
It's one of those things I feel like as well, where when you think of old photography, olden days, for me anyway, I visualise quite black and white, because obviously we only see black and white photos, or we see a lot of there wasn't much colour, so seeing these and seeing how much colour there was back then, I think it's quite nice to see that they use these quite a lot, especially in journals or scrapbooks. I feel like it's still a type of journaling, because it doesn't need the writing necessarily.
Yeah, I would say they're fitting your definition of the decoratively documenting, right, for sure, with the things that they're adding.
And I'm sure they enjoyed the process of sticking down these little colourful things. But yeah, the one that I have some photos of here is on an eBay listing, which is where I got a lot of my little books and albums and stuff. It has a little patch of writing in the front that has the name of the person whose book it was, the date, and then it says that it was a birthday gift from their mother for their 9th birthday. So she was 9 years old when she got this, and it's a really sweet little album. I debated buying it. I genuinely debated buying it, but I was like, I can't be buying any that size because they're quite big. But yeah, it seems to be that back then it was much more, I suppose, junk journaling. Like it was very much more aligned with what we now know as junk journaling, with using just random stuff, than buying things to put in there and everything, which I really like. And I think that's something that I do love about these little old books, is it's people just use what they had, whether that's things, scraps and things they found, whether it was these little, I suppose the colourful chromo things would be the things that they bought. That would be the bought item. But yeah, a lot of them just obviously added little bits of writing, or they would just doodle things or draw things or copy things from newspapers and stuff, which is, I just think it's really cool. Just
like collecting different bits of their life, I suppose.
Yeah, in whatever way they could, whatever they had around them, whatever they liked the look of. It went in in a little scrapbook. Some people more intentional with it, I suppose, with like going travelling and adding specific information. Or I know that some would collect like newspaper clippings of talking about a certain person in that era that was of importance. I know there's a lot of royal family scrapbooks that, especially in like Victorian era, people would collect things on the royal family. When I was on Newspaper Archive, I came across a few just kind of more general stationery advertisements, which I thought were really cool. I felt like whenever I searched journal or anything to do with journaling, obviously they kind of describe newspapers as the Daily Journal or something. Like they title, so a lot of things came up and it was really hard to like narrow down actual references of journaling or like a journal, someone's journal.
Was it more like diaries then, maybe?
Yeah, but then even that, I don't know why, but I think those two terms were just used more for, like, they would describe, like, here's the diary of events that is happening in the town, or so it's like put this in your diary type thing rather than
oh, like a planner.
Yeah, it was much more that side of the stationery and planner side rather than the scrapbooking, journaling, your life sort of side of things. So yeah, it was definitely harder to narrow things down, but whenever I typed in stationery it came up with some wonderful ads, which I thought were really cool, and these are from the like 1870s to 90s, and I love, with this first one, the text and how they have like tried to make it eye-catching and stuff, and they've gone, let's make the text go slightly wonky.
Like a design.
Yeah, olden days marketing right there.
I think my favourite bit of that is actually stationery. Yeah, that's brilliant.
How to grab someone's attention.
Yeah.
And obviously that's a brand listing off all the things that they sell. The new fashionable note paper, I would love to know what that would have been. You've got the cheap commercial envelope. You've got morning note paper and envelopes, which I thought that was really interesting, that they used to write on black border note paper or letter paper when someone had passed away or there was bad news from a family member or something, so that when the person received it, they could see it was going to be bad news before they read it, so they could kind of like prepare themselves rather than just opening a letter and being like, oh la la la, oh, granny's died, you know, like they can go, hang on a minute, there's some bad news coming, let me read this later, if they needed to. So they kind of thought about that in the way that they designed letter paper and stationery back then, which is kind of nice. It does say albums and scrapbooks, so they were on it, they were on the trend, they got their scrapbooks out, they were selling them, and they've gone for the same title grabbing way there with stationery.
Say it 3 times and we will appear.
Right. But yeah, their advertisement was a little bit shorter, probably just listing off the popular things at the time. Who knows?
Yeah, I love the wording of that, like, begs to call attention to his large and varied stock of stationery, embracing every variety and quality.
Right.
It's so like exaggerated.
They make it sound like you're gonna go to like the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory of stationery. It's like, oh my god, come and see what he has.
This is
like,
amazing.
It's probably just a bloke with like a suitcase with a couple of notepads on. There was a lot of mention of pens, specifically fountain pens, because I feel like that was the pen of the time. Obviously they didn't have biros and stuff back then. So you've got the Swan fountain pen, has no equal. Its advantages are many, and then it's really hard to read the last bit, but it says it combines cheapness, I think that says, through its great durability with thorough utility, convenience, and absolutely reliable working. So sounds like a pretty good pen, I'm not gonna lie. And then it has like the prices of them and stuff as well, which is, I always find that interesting because stationery nowadays I feel like it's going up.
Yeah.
As well. But yeah, so there was a couple of advertisements to do with fountain pens. It makes me laugh. It says comfort, quickness, and good signatures, as if the pen is the part that makes you have a good signature. Which part of me does, like, I agree with that to some level, because I write definitely with different pens.
Oh yeah, same.
But clearly back then, I don't know what their alternative necessarily would have been. It would have probably just been a dip pen, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Like, that would have been
dipping
the pen
into
before.
like a bottle of ink.
Yeah, and then fountain pens come along and we're like, whoa, the ink's in the pen? Whoa! So I'm guessing people probably had a bit of transition with fountain pens and their handwriting and stuff. This little snippet is to do with scrapbooking. I couldn't work out whether it was like advertising particularly or not. It was just kind of like a section in a larger area with other different like little titles. But yeah, it says many of our young friends will be glad of a suggestion for a useful and pleasant occupation during their leisure hours, by which they may brighten the long dreary hours of many little sufferers in our hospitals. So I think it must have been like a reach out, or like some sort of, I don't know, fundraising type thing for people who are in hospital, or kids specifically.
I think that's really interesting though, because it's almost getting at, you know how now there's quite a lot of talk about journaling and scrapbooking being like that sort of well-being, self-care, mindfulness. It's kind of like talking about that, really, isn't it? That like using the scrapbook as that kind of tool and place
like
to,
a relaxing hobby to take up. I feel like they're encouraging people to make them for kids in hospitals. That's the vibe that I'm getting from this one. Again, it was like like the whole newspaper page was lots of little random sections, so I don't know if it was like a reach out to the public and they can put whatever they want in this section sort of thing, and so there's lots of like random requests and mentions and stuff.
It's really interesting though, because it's kind of like, you know, you've shown those ones that have been more like focused on the collection of stuff and like somebody's personal collection of things they found interesting, and I suppose this is kind of like another use case where it's that more like the well-being side of it, like you said, for potentially if it's making them for somebody or like having them as gifts, and more of that hobby side of it.
I mean, it literally says at the end, there's no end to the pretty things one of these little books can be made to hold. They need not be occupied wholly with pictures. On some pages, a little piece of poetry can be neatly written with some suitable device in the corner. So it's like they're encouraging, it's like prompts.
Yeah.
Junk Journal July, back in the 1800s.
But I feel like that's really good advice even now, for like, they're basically saying like it doesn't have to be like a massive like grand scrapbook page. It can just be like a little snippet here and there, or just something you've jotted down, which I suppose is something we can take as good advice for our journals now. It was, I feel like, a much more simplified back then, because most people, you didn't have the opinions of hundreds of people online. Of like, you know, there's good pros and cons to it, I know, but like nowadays obviously we have hundreds of people on social media giving their opinion on how they're doing things and sharing how they're doing it, which might be slightly different to the next person who shares how they're doing it. So there's a lot of opinions of other people and ways that other people are doing that we're trying to take on board when we're doing our own journals. And if that was the only piece in that newspaper on scrapbooks and it appealed to someone, they'd probably just go by what that person said, and that would have been their inspiration and influence to do their own scrapbooks. So I think it is quite nice in a way, and it's definitely giving much more of like a slower pace to what we have today when it comes to scrapbooking and journaling and stuff. Yeah, it's really interesting to see they were like thinking that way even then, as it was kind of like starting up as like the sort of you know, the early days of it, because people, I suppose, didn't, like you were saying, didn't have a huge amount to go off what was like expected. It was just, they were just doing it, they were just collecting it. It wasn't like I have to do it a certain way. It was always kind of pushed as more of a mindful hobby, something that should just be done
in your own time as a leisurely occupation. The last bits and pieces that I have to share are from my own personal collection. There's a mix of the ones that I've bought, the little autograph books that I've bought, and also ones that I've been, like, they've been passed down in my own family. So they belong to people who I'm related to, which is really cool. But these are much more written journals, which I think probably this is more 20th century rather than 19th century. And even though there's definitely pictures and stuff and the same sort of Victorian scrapbooking style that crosses over, it does seem to be like written things, sometimes meaningful, sometimes just really light-hearted words and like poems and stuff. First little image that I have there is from my great-grandmother, her journal from the wartime, and I always find this really interesting because, and I think it kind of emphasizes how I feel about the importance of journaling and like having some sort of like social documentation of history alongside what you're told in school and what you're told just like as a general factual, this is what happened in history, because this is a person's perspective living in that time, and I feel like we can connect to that a lot more, especially as journalists. We can connect to that more than if you were to read something just in like a history book about the war or something. But I think it was very much because I realised in my grand's journals, she journaled in a very similar way to my great-grandmother, where it was very much like, this is the thing, here's the next thing, here's the next thing. It wasn't all like pages of romanticising what was happening. It was just, this is what's happening. On this little page there's a snippet and it says, well, Christmas came and was spent quietly owing to the war. Mrs. H sent down a parcel of provisions, which was very acceptable. Anne, which is my grandmother, and Roy having a game each. Lots have happened since. It is now May. Hendersons have had to move out of this lovely home and hand it over to the military for Canadian headquarters. So very much in the thick of the war. So she picked a pretty interesting time to journal, to be fair. But I think it is nice having it kind of shows that you don't have to write a lot for it to still be interesting and worth writing. Like, she just pretty much bullet pointed what happened in those days, how she felt, things about neighbours, just like the happenings, but from her perspective. And I think that's the important bit, that when I read these I was like, that's the takeaway that I want to take from this, is that if I'm writing stuff, I don't have to like write a story of my life, you know. Some people do, that's fine.
Yeah. I
can't do that, and I've definitely felt the pressure to do that because, you know, the whole journal needs writing. I don't believe it does, but if you're someone who wants to add writing and doesn't feel like they can do the whole, I need to write about my life in this romantic way and la la la, you don't, because this is just as interesting to me. They're
just
anyway.
Like the short little entries. And I suppose when you, because obviously you've got like some photos, and I suppose when you put them alongside each other, because obviously this hasn't been done in that similar way we were just talking about earlier with like the scrapbooks, where it was the pictures and the bits collected like with the writing. This is like a separate piece of writing. I suppose you can compare and almost cross-reference, like, okay, this entry must have been around about the time of this photo, and I suppose it can kind of like give a lot more context then of what was actually happening. So you could picture like, okay, she stood there, like, I don't know, she stood in the farm or something like that, and then you read the entry and you'll be like, oh, and then she went to do X, Y, and Z. Like
that's literally it. She doesn't necessarily mention like how her day of work was or whatever. She just mentions that she went to work, or she mentions that my gran did this today, or like started walking or whatever, and she doesn't go into like a whole, oh my god, this is so amazing, she's such a she just goes, she started walking today, and then put that alongside a photo of my gran when she was a kid, and my brain's like, "Aw." It gives a bit of like, I don't know, it's the personal side to it for sure, and I think it is really nice, and I think that is something that definitely inspires me to carry on doing my journals, because when I'm not here, someone can still, like family members, if I have a kid, stuff like that, they'll be able to kind of get some sort of idea of who I am as a person from me, not from everything that other people say about me, if that makes sense. So yeah, that was my great grandmother's journal, and then she carried on the tradition by giving my gran a little autograph book for one of her, I think it was I don't know if it was a birthday or something like that. Yeah, she wrote on the inside, "To Anne, with love and best wishes from Mum and Dad," and then she wrote the date, and she was very specific with that date. She's like, Sunday, 14th of June 42. But yeah, the autograph books are always, this is kind of the ones that I find most interesting. A lot of the time they were given to younger kids. They're obviously smaller books, smaller journals, so they could get their friends and stuff to add a little something in it, or a little doodle. So a lot of them, they're not just like an older generation documenting things that they're going through in their life. It's like just funny little things in these little autograph books, and things they might find interesting. Or a lot of the time especially my grand's one, she would copy like drawings, she would copy things from things she had seen, or she'd obviously traced certain things from potentially a newspaper or something, like an image that she liked, that she wanted to have a go at drawing but couldn't quite, so she traced it and then, like for like coloured it and stuff. They were much more, there wasn't necessarily, or from the ones that I've come across, there's not as much stuff stuck in it, so it's not necessarily like the scrapbook journal, junk journal-y side that we see today, but it's definitely a type of journaling, of like putting you and your personality into a little book.
And I suppose it's just really interesting to see all of the different ways that people have basically tried to do that same thing, that original idea from the Oxford Dictionary of preservation in a book, and all the different ways that we have done that and continue to do that within our journals, our scrapbooks, our notebooks. Yeah. Sort of keeping that tradition going.
It's nice to think that in 100 years or something, this that we're doing now, like the journaling we're doing now, will have probably evolved massively to something that we can't even like put our brains to, because when my gran and all these people in like the 1800s were doing their little journals, at that point obviously they didn't have a clue the internet would exist. That's not even in their brain space. So sitting here now talking about our journals and being like, they didn't have washi tape, there's probably someone in the future sitting there going, washi tape, look at this. Yeah. And it's something even cooler. So it's just really nice to see the evolution of journals and stuff through the years.
Oh, that was really cool to see, that little like deep dive into that history. Like Daisy said, we'll pop a link to maybe like a blog post or a document, or there'll be something somewhere where you can look at all this stuff in more detail if you want to. It'll be linked down in the description box. Let us know if you have any collections of scrapbooks or like old journals and what you've found within them. We'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, that would be really cool, because there's a lot out there.
And speaking of lots of scrapbooks, I'd like to introduce you to Mandy from PaperOfThePast. We had an absolutely lovely chat about her scrapbook collection, so let's listen into that now. Really excited to chat to you about your scrapbooks, which I have followed on Instagram for a good few years now, and I'm just obsessed with all of the different old-fashioned scrapbooks and vintage finds that you share. So interested to learn more about how you got into that, like what inspired your interest in specifically these old scrapbooks.
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely started with one scrapbook a long time ago. I believe I was maybe a freshman or a junior in college, and I found one in a thrift store, and it definitely caught my interest. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And that was my only book for a while. And then for a couple, maybe like a year or two from there, people were telling me, oh, you might be able to find more online. So when I started looking into that, like, could I find more? And then when I did, it just went from there. I just kept finding more and more books, as you can see from my collection online.
And how many have you got now?
I don't have an exact count. I usually say it's around 500, maybe a little more.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
but that also includes letter lots and like maybe like photo albums and things like that too. I've always been interested in books, so even as a young kid, that was my main concern. You know, my main interest was I want to buy books, I want to go to the library and check out books, I want to organize my books. So it's always been, that interest has been there. But I started out early collecting, you know, before finding my first book. I started out collecting old postcards. So I like to go to thrift stores and just, like, you know, go to the postcard bins and boxes and search through those. The idea of old paper telling a lot of story with, you know, paper, words, written stuff, scraps has been interesting to me for a while.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, isn't it? Because I know on your page you kind of tell the story of the particular scrapbook that you're showing. Is that something that you are quite interested in as well? Like the stories behind the physical items, I suppose.
I do like that. I like to see what the page tells me. And sometimes I get help from that on Instagram too, because I don't always know exactly what's going on. So I can post a few photos, and a lot of times the people writing comments help out too, and they say, oh, I know something about that, or they add their own knowledge, and so that helps too. It's kind of crowdsourced in that way.
What sort of inspired you to start sharing them on Instagram?
I think I was so excited by them, and I needed an outlet to share that with other people. Like, my husband will only talk about scrapbooks for so much, you know, for so much time. He's not that interested, and which is totally fine. So I thought, oh, you know, let me see if there's other people who kind of get this and are inspired by it and stuff. And so I started sharing, I think in 2015, I want to say. It's been about 10 years now. And pretty much right away, people were interested. So that was very nice to see.
So what's the process for like deciding which ones you want to feature?
And I usually just see what I feel inspired by that day that I'm taking the photo, because usually that helps. If I'm excited about something on a page or a certain book, then I go, okay, let's photograph that and get it shared. Sometimes I try to photograph multiple books in a day, and that isn't always the best way to go about it, even though it does make it easier to like post consistently. So I'm always like balancing that. Like, okay, I want to post often, but I also want to wait till I'm excited by one certain page and then share that. So I guess it depends.
Yeah, definitely. Because I could imagine if I had so many scrapbooks, I'd almost get lost in like, I'd start flicking through them thinking, right, I want to post one. And then I would just get lost in looking at all the pages. I can imagine it's quite difficult to actually, like, okay, I've got to focus on like sharing a post, because it's just like a rabbit hole, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I always joke around. It's like, I'm surprised I even leave my house. I have so many books. I have things I haven't even looked at yet. I have letters that I'm trying to read, and it's all very fascinating and fun. And yes, it is a distraction sometimes too.
So what's been your favorite like scrapbook or favorite story that you found from one of these scrapbooks, if you can choose?
Difficult to choose, but well, I will say that my favorite type of book tends to combine like the scrapbook with the diary, with the art journal, with the photo album. It has a little bit of elements of all of those things. If I could have a wish list, that's what I'm hoping to find. They are a little bit harder to find when they have all those elements combined. But kind of opposite of that, one of my most favorite books recently is, you might have seen it, it's the one that is the collection of tea tags.
Yes.
A person used a small autograph album and saved individual tea tags from, I would assume, all of her tea over a 20-year period. And It starts, I think, in the late 1930s, goes all the way through, I want to say, the late 1950s. So it's 20 years of tea tags, and they looked great in the past, so a lot of good design elements too.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to see all the different, like, the designs, like the typography in all of the, like, old packaging and things, because you don't kind of think about that when you're obviously, like, if I save something for my journal, I think, oh, that looks cool, but, like, when you're so, like, distanced then from it, like, how different everything can look looking back on them.
Yeah, it's difficult to explain, but I feel like in our books, we are documenting a lot, but sometimes we don't realize that we are documenting things that are going to be totally different, and we don't really know that contrast until all that time has passed. That's why I do like to save a lot of food packaging and things like in ads and things in my books, because those change, within years, 5 years, definitely 10 years, they're different.
Yeah, or even, because I was talking to my friend about how when you go to, like, a concert or something now, they just give you, like, a printout or, like, a QR code. You don't even get, like, an actual ticket anymore. So now it's, like,
Yes.
even more fascinating to look back on, like, oh, wow, you used to get a ticket for this.
Exactly, yeah. We're in a weird spot where we can print anything we can imagine and cut it out, but in terms of getting stuff, like, in our day-to-day life, we're a little more limited. But there are cool things. I mean, I'm always on the lookout, so I tend to find a few things, maybe not weekly, but I try.
Yeah, I feel like I'm the same. What's your journaling and sort of scrapbook process look like then? Because I know you share lots of these, like, ones that you find, but in terms of how you document stuff yourself, like you were saying, what does that sort of look like to you?
I try to do the version of the books that I mentioned liking a lot, which is it's a little bit of a diary, it's a scrapbook, and it's also photos. I use a moleskin art sketchbook. It's like a A4 size, I think. But I like to go chronological and document things that I do in my daily life, and look out for packaging. And if I get a cool ticket stub, I'm like, thank you. I'm very happy to have this. The people around me are on board too. My husband always comes home like, oh, I got you this for your scrapbook. I'm like, thank you. Very nice. You know exactly
trained.
what I like. Yes, yes. Yeah. And I see that in older books too. People will say, they'll write a caption. I'll say, oh, so-and-so gave me this for my book. And like, this other friend gave me this for my book. And I really love that, to have that little community kind of around getting this book put together is pretty cool.
Oh, that's nice to know that even back then people were sort of, training their friends and family to be on the lookout for all these paper pieces.
Exactly. I'm like, I relate to that. I like that.
So with you having 500 or so of these scrapbooks, and I assume quite a few of your own books as well, how do you store them? Like, because do they need like special sort of archiving, things like that?
The main type of box that I buy, it's called I believe the brand is Pioneer. So it's a Pioneer jumbo scrapbook box. I don't know. I mean, you might be able to see behind me, I have some, I don't know if we'll have the visual on video, but it's basically a lot of those boxes stacked up on shelves and closets and everywhere. I try to keep them pretty organized, and I really only have the books out if I'm looking at them or photographing them. Otherwise, they're pretty much put away. You could come to my house and not necessarily know that I collect them. So I try to keep them protected. It's a whole process. I'm running out of space. That's why I'm kind of hesitant. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But yes, they are boxed up and safe.
And I suppose, do you feel maybe a bit responsible then for like preserving them and sort of keeping the stories alive then, I suppose, for like, whoever's going to collect them next?
Yes, I do think about that, because very often I'll buy books from other collectors, or I might see some clues about who had this book last. And if they're old enough, if it's a book from the 1860s or something like that, it's already changed hands multiple times. And so I do think it's important to keep them as safe as possible and store them well, and hope that they will continue on and more people will see them. I like the juxtaposition of, on one hand, this is an everyday object made with everyday things. It's not fancy or special or whatever, technically, if you think of it like that. But at the same time, it does feel like a treasure. It feels like, how did this book get made and how is it still here? That's what I like, because there's like surprise on both sides. It's relatable, it's timeless, it's everyday, but at the same time, I mean, you can see it when I share too, where just all of us, or a lot of people are like, what? That's the greatest book ever.
Yeah, and it's so fun to see for inspiration as well, I think, for our pages that we do now, whether it's the visual side of things, like how they've put the page together, or even like the handwriting and like the little notes and things. Yeah, it's just fascinating.
It is. And I've found that there's not one style that works the best. It's really, I've seen expensive books made by wealthy people, and I've also loved a lined notebook made by a 13-year-old. So it's not like one answer. It's just, I think it's the person really enjoying what they're doing and trying to tell something, and they get it right. I don't know, it's different every time, but somehow we're able to see it maybe 100 years later, and most people can like recognize something in the book itself.
Yeah, I love that you can kind of see their story, and it's not the pressure necessarily to be documenting it perfectly, but just any glimpse that we see. And I think especially because it's the physical form, I think that's just it's really sweet as well when I see that you've shared a page and it's like, from, like you said, from like a 13-year-old girl, or somebody's got it for like a notebook for Christmas or something like that. I just think that's so sweet, because I just imagine like a little girl so excited to start like using her scrapbook and sort of pasting in all the things she just finds interesting about different things.
Yes, I do love books made by younger people and children, because their excitement tends to come through on the page, and I think we can relate to that too, like regardless of age, but it's nice to see it documented in such a cool way. There's one that's a 1890s travel book, and it's very large, and the person used it as a travel diary, so there's a lot of handwritten details about their trip, I think, to Europe, and they travel around different countries. But she also pasted in photos and menus and ticket stubs back when ticket stubs looked great. And I think because of the variety and also the size of the book, that is one of my favorites that I could share photos of, and people go, yep, I get it. That is a really cool book. That's very cool.
Yeah, I feel like we're all the same, just like equally like impressed by all of these old books.
Yes.
So before we wrap, is there anything you wanted to share for people maybe who are curious about collecting or sort of sourcing their own vintage scrapbooks? Is there like a certain place that you go to find them? Because you seem to find incredible ones.
Yes, I find most of them on eBay, and it's really a matter of looking often. And sometimes people say, oh, what search term do you use? And I have over 100 saved searches, and I'm just searching a lot. And it's not that hard to do, but you just have to look and kind of develop for yourself like what you're interested in, because there is a lot out there. And it's just a matter of looking often and then buying if you can, and then it takes time. These days I probably buy one book every 6 months or so it's slowed down a little bit for me.
Well, thank you for joining us. It's been fascinating to delve into the world of all these scrapbooks. We'll pop your handle up on the screen for Instagram, which is PaperOfThePast.
Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to hearing other episodes as well. And I also enjoy your account and love everything that you post, so thank you.
Oh, thank you.
What you do.
Thank you for joining us. I was so pleased to have you on the podcast, and hear more about the scrapbooks that I've been following for years. So thank you so much.
Thank you.